There exists within human behavior a form of communication so subtle, so unconsciously revealing, that it bypasses all conscious defenses and speaks directly from the depths of authentic feeling, a language that Jung recognized as more truthful than any words could ever be. This is the language of small gestures, unconscious actions, and automatic behaviors that emerge not from calculated intention, but from what Jung called the authentic self, expressing itself through the body, before the mind can censor, edit, or control its revelations. When a man's unconscious speaks through his actions, it tells the truth about his feelings with a precision and honesty that his conscious mind, bound by fear and social conditioning, could never achieve. Jung understood that the unconscious operates through what he called symbolic expression, the psyche's tendency to communicate its deepest truths through symbols, actions, and gestures that carry far more meaning than their surface appearance would suggest. When we observe a man's small gestures with psychological awareness, we are not just seeing random behaviors, but witnessing direct communications from his unconscious mind about his true feelings, desires, and psychological state regarding the relationship. These small gestures reveal authentic feeling because they emerge from what Jung identified as the autonomous complex, psychological patterns that operate independently of conscious control and express the person's genuine emotional reality. Unlike words, which can be chosen, calculated, and controlled to create specific impressions, small gestures emerge spontaneously from the unconscious and therefore carry the authenticity of unguarded truth. The first category of revealing gestures operates through what Jung called proximity patterns, the unconscious ways a man positions his body in relation to yours, manages physical space, and creates or maintains distance based on his internal emotional state. When a man is genuinely drawn to you, his body automatically orients toward yours. In group settings, he finds excuses to move closer during conversations, and he unconsciously creates what I call intimate space bubbles that exclude others while including you. These proximity patterns reveal his psychological relationship to you because they emerge from what Jung identified as the territorial instinct of love. When someone becomes emotionally significant, the unconscious begins to treat them as psychologically belonging to your personal space. The man who consistently positions himself where he can see you, who naturally gravitates toward your vicinity without conscious planning, who creates reasons for physical closeness, is revealing through his unconscious movement patterns that you have achieved central importance in his psychological landscape. The second category emerges through what Jung called attention distribution patterns, the unconscious ways his focus, awareness, and mental energy organize themselves around your presence. This manifests as what I call selective attention syndrome. He notices details about you that others miss, remembers conversations with unusual precision, and tracks your emotional states with an accuracy that reveals deep psychological investment. These attention patterns include what Jung identified as unconscious monitoring. He becomes aware of your location in social settings without obviously watching you, notices changes in your mood or energy before you've said anything, and responds to your needs or preferences before you've explicitly expressed them. This monitoring is not stalking or obsession, but the natural result of someone becoming what Jung called a central figure in the unconscious. When you matter deeply to his psyche, his awareness automatically tracks your well-being as a survival mechanism. The third category operates through care patterns, the small actions of protection, service, and consideration that emerge spontaneously when someone's well-being becomes unconsciously important to him. These might include automatically walking on the street side of the sidewalk, bringing you coffee without being asked, checking that you got home safely, or making sure you're comfortable in social situations. Jung understood that these care patterns reveal what he called the protective instinct of attachment. When someone becomes psychologically important, the unconscious begins to extend protective awareness toward their safety, comfort, and well-being. The man who consistently performs small acts of service, who anticipates your needs, who automatically positions himself as a protective presence, is revealing through unconscious caretaking behaviors that you have activated his deepest attachment patterns. These small gestures are more revealing than words because they emerge from what Jung called the primary process, the unconscious level of psychological functioning that operates according to authentic feeling rather than social acceptability, personal safety, or rational calculation. Words can lie, but unconscious gestures speak truth. The fourth category of revealing gestures operates through what Jung identified as somatic truth-telling, the way the body unconsciously expresses feelings that the mind refuses to acknowledge or admit. When a man's unconscious feelings become strong enough, they begin to leak through his physical presence in ways that reveal the depth of his attachment, while his conscious mind maintains the fiction of casual interest. These somatic revelations occur because the body cannot lie with the same sophistication as the conscious mind. This somatic truth-telling manifests through what I call micro-expressions of longing, brief facial expressions, fleeting touches, momentary glances that reveal the intensity of his feelings before his conscious control can suppress them. You might notice the way his face softens when he first sees you, how his voice changes when he says your name, or the unconscious smile that appears when you laugh. These micro-expressions emerge from what Jung called the feeling-toned complex, emotional patterns so powerful they override conscious control. The body also reveals hidden feelings through what Jung called nervous system activation. When you're near, his physiology responds as if to something emotionally significant, creating subtle changes in breathing, skin color, energy level, or physical coordination. He might become slightly more animated in your presence, develop a subtle tremor when touching you, or exhibit what appears to be nervousness that actually indicates the activation of his attachment system. The fifth category emerges through ritual behavior patterns, the unconscious development of repetitive actions, routines, or ceremonies that center around your relationship. These might include specific ways he greets you, particular routines he follows when you're together, or small traditions he creates that mark your connection as special and significant in his psychological landscape. Jung understood that ritual behaviors emerge from what he called the archaic layer of the psyche, the ancient part of human consciousness that creates ceremonies and repeated actions to honor what is sacred or psychologically important. When a man unconsciously develops rituals around your relationship, he is revealing through archetypal behavior patterns that you have achieved sacred status in his inner world. These ritual patterns might include always texting you "good morning," having specific playlists he associates with you, preparing certain foods when you visit, or following particular conversational patterns that have become meaningful markers of your unique connection. The development of these rituals indicates that his unconscious has begun to organize itself around your presence and create ceremonies that honor the significance of your relationship. The sixth category operates through what Jung called possession and territory markers, unconscious behaviors that reveal his psychological sense of connection to you, even when no formal commitment has been established. These might include the way he positions himself between you and other men, how he introduces you to others, or the subtle ways he marks his psychological territory around your relationship. This territorial behavior manifests as what I call unconscious claiming gestures, actions that reveal his psychological sense of ownership or connection without conscious acknowledgement of possessive feelings. He might unconsciously guide you through crowds with his hand on your back, position himself as a protective presence in social situations, or speak about you to others in ways that imply special connection or insider knowledge. Jung recognized that these claiming behaviors emerge from what he called the archetypal masculine imperative, ancient psychological patterns that drive men to psychologically claim what they perceive as belonging to them. When a man begins unconsciously treating you as psychologically his, even without formal acknowledgement, he is revealing through primitive behavioral patterns that you have achieved central importance in his unconscious relationship schema. The seventh and most revealing category involves what Jung called future-oriented preparation behaviors, unconscious actions that reveal he is mentally including you in his future plans, even when his conscious mind hasn't acknowledged this assumption. These might include mentioning events that are months away as if your attendance is assumed, making purchases or decisions that consider your preferences, or unconsciously planning his life around your availability and interests. These preparation behaviors reveal what Jung identified as unconscious commitment. His psyche has already begun organizing itself as if you are a permanent part of his life, even though his conscious mind may not have reached this conclusion. The man who unconsciously factors your preferences into his decisions, who mentions future events as shared experiences, who begins to think in terms of we rather than I, is revealing through forward-planning behaviors that his unconscious has already made commitments his conscious mind hasn't acknowledged. The eighth category of revealing gestures operates through what Jung called projection recovery behaviors, the unconscious actions that occur when a man begins to see his own rejected or undeveloped aspects reflected in you, and his psyche attempts to integrate these projections through relationship behaviors. This manifests as sudden interest in activities you enjoy, adoption of perspectives you've shared, or unconscious mimicry of your communication styles and energy patterns. Jung understood that projection recovery represents what he called the individuation drive through relationship, the unconscious recognition that psychological wholeness requires integrating the qualities that another person represents in your psyche. When a man begins unconsciously adopting your interests, values, or ways of being, he is revealing through imitative behavior that you have become what Jung called a carrier of his anima projection, the external representation of his own undeveloped feminine qualities. These projection recovery behaviors might include him developing sudden appreciation for music you love, beginning to express emotions in ways that mirror your emotional intelligence, or incorporating your perspectives into his worldview without conscious recognition of this psychological adoption. This mimicry reveals that his unconscious has recognized you as essential for his own psychological development and integration. The ninth category emerges through what Jung identified as sacrifice and service patterns, unconscious behaviors that reveal he has begun to prioritize your well-being, happiness, or convenience over his own without conscious decision to make such sacrifices. These patterns emerge from what Jung called the lover's psychology, the unconscious reorganization of priorities that occurs when someone achieves central importance in your psychological landscape. These sacrifice patterns manifest as automatic choices that benefit you at cost to himself, changing his schedule to accommodate your availability, choosing activities based on your preferences rather than his own, or making decisions that serve your interests, even when they conflict with his immediate desires. The key indicator is that these sacrifices feel natural and automatic to him rather than forced or resentful. Jung recognized that unconscious sacrifice patterns reveal what he called psychological marriage. Even without formal commitment, his psyche has begun operating as if your well-being is essential to his own psychological equilibrium. This represents a fundamental shift from independent to interdependent consciousness that usually precedes conscious acknowledgement of deep attachment. The 10th category operates through what Jung called protective instinct activation, unconscious behaviors that reveal he has begun to experience threats to your safety, comfort, or happiness as personal threats requiring his intervention. This might manifest as hypervigilance about your emotional state, automatic defensive responses when others criticize you, or unconscious positioning of himself as a shield between you and potential sources of harm. This protective activation reveals what Jung identified as the guardian archetype, ancient psychological patterns that emerge when someone becomes important enough to trigger masculine protective instincts. The man who automatically scans environments for threats to your comfort, who becomes subtly aggressive when others disrespect you, or who positions himself as your defender without conscious decision, is revealing through archetypal behavior that you have achieved what Jung called protected status in his unconscious hierarchy. The 11th and most profound category involves what Jung called soul recognition behaviors, gestures that reveal he has unconsciously recognized you as what he termed the other half of his psychological wholeness. These behaviors emerge from the deepest layers of the psyche and indicate not just attraction or attachment, but what Jung called psychological conjunction, the recognition of spiritual partnership. Soul recognition behaviors include unconscious synchronization of breathing patterns when you're close, automatic emotional attunement to your internal states, and what appears to be psychic connection that allows him to sense your needs or moods without external cues. He might call when you're thinking of him, show up when you need support without being asked, or demonstrate uncanny awareness of your internal experiences. Jung understood that these behaviors indicate activation of what he called the transcendent function in relationship, the psychological mechanism through which two people become channels for each other's spiritual and psychological development. When soul recognition behaviors emerge, the relationship has moved beyond ordinary connection into what Jung called the sacred marriage, a partnership that serves not just personal happiness, but mutual individuation and spiritual evolution. These unconscious gestures reveal more than words because they emerge from layers of psychological truth that conscious communication cannot access. They represent direct expressions of archetypal patterns, authentic feelings, and spiritual recognition that bypass all ego defenses and social conditioning to speak the truth of deep psychological connection. We arrive now at the most crucial understanding, recognizing that these small gestures represent not just communication, but invitation. Unconscious requests for recognition, response, and reciprocal engagement that, when met with appropriate awareness and wisdom, can facilitate the evolution of hidden feelings into conscious connection. Jung emphasized that the goal of psychological awareness is not just understanding, but conscious participation in the process of individuation and authentic relationship development. The first principle for reading unconscious gestures is what Jung called symbolic literacy, learning to see beyond the surface action to the deeper psychological communication being expressed. When a man consistently performs small protective gestures, he is not just being helpful, but unconsciously communicating his psychological investment in your well-being. When he develops rituals around your relationship, he is not just being thoughtful, but revealing that you have achieved sacred status in his psyche. This symbolic literacy requires developing what Jung called the feeling function, the capacity to evaluate experiences based on their meaning, significance, and emotional value, rather than just their logical content or practical utility. The woman who can read the psychological significance of small gestures possesses a form of intelligence that allows her to respond to the deeper communication rather than just the surface action. The second principle involves what Jung called conscious reciprocity, responding to unconscious communications in ways that honor their psychological significance while encouraging movement toward greater consciousness and authentic expression. This means acknowledging the care behind protective gestures, appreciating the intention behind service behaviors, and recognizing the significance of ritual development without demanding conscious explanation or formal declaration. Conscious reciprocity also involves what I call graduated vulnerability, matching his unconscious emotional revelations with appropriate levels of your own authentic expression. When his gestures reveal deep attachment, you can respond with increased openness. When his behavior indicates protective instincts, you can express appreciation for his care. When his actions suggest future-oriented thinking, you can share your own vision of shared possibilities. The third principle Jung would emphasize is patience with the process, understanding that the movement from unconscious gesture to conscious declaration is a natural psychological development that cannot be forced without damaging the organic process of emotional integration. The unconscious gestures represent his psyche's attempt to test the waters of deeper connection, to assess safety for greater vulnerability, to gradually acclimate to the reality of profound attachment. This patience requires what Jung called holding the tension, maintaining awareness of what his gestures reveal about his feelings, while allowing him the time and space necessary for his conscious mind to catch up with his unconscious truth. Pressuring for premature declaration or trying to force conscious acknowledgement of what his gestures reveal can drive the feelings back into hiding rather than encouraging their natural emergence. The fourth and most important principle involves what Jung called self-differentiation, maintaining your own psychological center and authentic response patterns while engaging with his unconscious communications. This means neither ignoring the significance of his gestures nor organizing your entire emotional life around interpreting and responding to them. Self-differentiation requires asking crucial questions. What do these gestures mean to me? How do I want to respond to this level of unconscious attachment? What serves my own growth and happiness in this situation? The goal is not just to decode his feelings, but to make conscious choices about how to engage with the relationship that honor both his psychological process and your own authentic desires. Jung also emphasized the importance of what he called reality testing, distinguishing between gestures that indicate genuine deep feeling and those that might represent habit, social conditioning, or temporary attraction. True unconscious communication has consistency, depth, and what Jung called numinous quality. It feels charged with meaning and significance that transcends ordinary social interaction. The ultimate wisdom Jung would offer is this: small gestures reveal the truth of unconscious feeling, but conscious relationship requires that unconscious truth to evolve into conscious choice and explicit commitment. The gestures are not the destination but the pathway, not the relationship but the invitation to relationship, not love itself but love seeking recognition and conscious expression. Your ability to read these unconscious communications gives you valuable information about his authentic feelings. But your wisdom lies in using this information to make conscious choices about your own response, your own investment, and your own relationship goals. The small gestures tell you what is true in his unconscious. Only conscious conversation can determine what is possible in your shared reality. Recognition is power. Conscious response is wisdom. How you use both determines whether unconscious attachment evolves into conscious love or remains forever trapped in the realm of unspoken longing. The gestures are speaking. The question is, how will you answer? If you've been missing the profound communications happening beneath the surface of words, if you now recognize gestures you've seen but never understood their deeper meaning, then your transformation in relationships begins with developing what Jung called symbolic literacy, the ability to read the unconscious language that speaks truth more clearly than words ever could. Subscribe to this channel if you're ready to dive deeper into the psychology of unconscious communication and learn to recognize the authentic feelings that express themselves through actions rather than words. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that the most important conversations often happen without words, through the gestures that emerge from the heart before the mind can censor them. And most importantly, practice this today. Observe the small gestures of people in your life with new awareness. Notice patterns of proximity, attention, care, and protection. Ask yourself what these unconscious behaviors might be communicating about authentic feelings that haven't found their way into words yet. These small gestures are gifts, direct communications from the unconscious that bypass all defenses to tell you the truth about someone's feelings. When you learn to read this language, you gain access to emotional reality that words often hide or distort. Stop waiting for perfect words and start recognizing perfect truth expressed through imperfect actions. Stop demanding verbal declarations and start appreciating unconscious revelations. Stop missing the profound communications happening through the language your unconscious speaks fluently, the language of authentic gesture. His small actions are telling you everything you need to know. Are you listening?